125,000 people is a lot of people to try to fit into Boston Common. I was explaining it to Desmond and now to a couple of you already. You know, that would be like taking the entire city of Worcester, like everyone in it, and just transporting them into this tiny space. So it was really, really packed. It was so crowded that to move anywhere required a large number of small, silent, and sometimes vocalized negotiations and compromises. Acts of caring and consideration as parents tried to stay with their children in this constantly shifting crowd. And groups of friends tried to find each other, to stay reasonably connected. And in that way, it was actually kind of like Jon Stewart's reading today. You go, then I will go. You go, then I go. A diverse group of people with a wide array of perspectives and motivations for being there, just working together in a dizzying variety of ways, merely to get from one place to another place. But while Stewart's traffic metaphor works well in the context of that rally and his rally to restore sanity, and in the context of, say, the intersection of routes 9 and 27, a lot has changed since his speech. Sanity was not restored. For the most part, as a society, we seem to have gone for and or fear. And now it doesn't seem quite so much like real life in the realm of public discourse. Traffic patterns are naturally governed by the presence and absence of roads, and laws that everyone recognizes, and precedent when all else fails. And this group at the march was in some sense an intentional embodiment, an example of how a large group of people can work together through those sorts of agreements. Now there's a higher level of chaos in our political conversation. And it's there because some folks have decided to forego the usual rules that govern this kind of talk. So the metaphor that I thought of for our current situation is something other than our nation's highway system or a gathering of peaceful protesters. We needed something with a little more verve to it. So when I was thinking about how most people talk to each other about important issues these days, I thought of the most tightly packed and free-form location I know, namely the situation that occurs at the Ashland Market Basket during peak hours. Have any of you been there? You probably haven't because it's blocked. Okay, a couple of you have been there. Now, most of you, I think, are aware that the fact that Market Basket can be a little chaotic, and this particular Market Basket can be quite the experience. It is, after all, a full-service discount grocery store with about 2/3 of the space that you would think they would need to just minimally get done what they want to get done. And its popularity means that it is always over capacity on the weekends. Each aisle, roughly a cart and a half wide, features at least one traffic hazard, like an abandoned cart or a worker restocking shelves. To shop at Market Basket on the weekend means getting accustomed to traffic jams, and not in your car, but with your cart. Getting accustomed to standing in random lines that appear for no reason. Getting accustomed to waiting for other customers to select the perfect carton of eggs, or to finally get around to deciding on which sliced turkey would be perfect for their lunch boxes during the week. Maybe that's why not so many of you have been to Market Basket actually. Market Basket isn't the sort of place you go shopping if you have to be somewhere in a couple of hours. But I love it. I really do. At least when everything is going smoothly. Now, last Saturday, I actually got stuck for what felt like forever in a small corner of the produce section with about 7 other carts and their associated owners. In fact, as we're sitting there, more carts are coming, complicating the unsticking process, as you might imagine. Now, once I realized I was trapped and was going to be there, I looked around and noticed that the keystone of our cart jam was a young girl who had gotten her cart wedged between the avocados on one side and an older gentleman looking at tofu on the other. Now, those of you who have been there know exactly where I was. And she was just making a total hash of trying to back her cart out. Now, this could have been a really sketchy situation. I've seen fights break out in lesser grocery stores over less. But here's what happened at Market Basket. During this girl's work in progress, shall we say, none of us complained. No one even rolled their eyes. Because getting into cart jams at Market Basket is the price we pay for choosing to shop there. Instead, everyone looked around for Mom. And the girl's mother, as it turns out, had a new baby who was in a stroller. And she was also stuck. So after assessing the situation and understanding the mom's predicament, the man with the tofu turned and patiently explained to the girl how to free her cart, and therefore how to free ours. And then we all got back to our tasks a little bit later than we would have been, but otherwise undamaged. Now, political life, I think, needs to be like that. It isn't just a question of taking your turn, like we do in our cars, privately fuming, but publicly cooperating. Instead, it's about exercising our ability to empathize and to understand. It means taking a deep breath, refusing, at first at least, to assign blame, and helping out another human being in order to solve a problem. The man with the tofu saw a harried mother in need of help and understanding, and a kid who was doing her best in a position of responsibility, instead of seeing some jerk keeping us from the tomatoes. At the grocery store, or at the rally for that matter, you don't have the benefit of a car. You don't have the benefit of a box made of metal and glass. Instead, you have to look into the eyes of everyone else. And sometimes you learn something about them. Sometimes, if only for a moment, you have to reach outside yourself to take care of someone else before you get what you need. Now let's take a look again at those words from Reverend Theodore Parker. I do not pretend to understand the moral universe, he says. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but a little ways. But I can divine it by conscience. And from what I see, I am sure it bends toward justice. Now last Sunday, it was Martin Luther King Sunday, we talked about moving from anger as a source of energy for acting in the world to acting out of a place of love, of divine love, in fact. And this love is what bends the arc of the moral universe. A love of humanity, for creation, and for God, however we may conceive God. Divine love not only helps you stand by your convictions, it also helps you in the cart jams of public debate, when we choose not to erect barriers, when we refuse to put up walls between people and ideas. The arc of the universe continues its journey when we insist on speaking out, when we step out of cages of fear or resentment and step out into the street to say our piece, in the hope that even though we cannot see over the horizon ourselves, the promised land is at the other end. That journey requires us to speak, but it also requires something else of us. You see, we also need to listen. Divine love demands the hard work, not of conversion, but of conversation. Now, I want to be clear. Listening from a position of divine love is not an indication of weakness. We do not need to vacillate. We do not need to be deferential or overly polite or even tasteful all the time. Jesus wasn't tasteful or respectable. Frequently, he wasn't respectful. Theodore Parker angered pretty much everyone. Olympia Brown, who by this point you should know something about, took to the streets in ways pretty much identical to the women's marches yesterday. No acting from a position of love. Acting from a position of love is acting from a position of strength. It changes our approach. It changes our approach in ways that are subtle but often important. It may or may not alter our tactics. It may or may not alter our resolve. It may not ultimately change our position on the issue at hand. However, it can change our attitude and our understanding of the motivations of those who do, in fact, disagree with us. Speaking and hearing from a place of love reminds us that our opponent isn't necessarily some self-entitled bozo trying to cut us off in traffic. Our opponent may just be a kid with a cart, trying to do her best and not knowing how. Acting out of love reminds us to be patient. It reminds us of that long part of the arc and calls us to respect the holy in our neighbors and even in our enemies. Removing the barriers between us when we speak and act prepares us for constructive and deepening dialogue when and if that opportunity arises. But Adam, some of you probably should be thinking, and if you're not, you will now. Adam, what about that bozo who is in fact cutting us off with their car? What about the kid who won't accept help, who wants to go on thinking that ramming into the avocado stand or blaming those around her will solve her problem? Or what about the fellow shopper who would rather judge from afar than risk stepping up? This, I think, is the greatest challenge we face as a society today. Because frankly, you need two people for a conversation. And sometimes that's one more person than we have. Which brings us to that reading in Acts today. At the end of that reading, Peter turns to address the crowd. Their responses to him and his friends at this point range from pretty much from confused to hostile. All were amazed and perplexed, the book of Acts says, saying to one another, "What does this mean?" And others sneered and said, "They are filled with new wine." The apostles had created a scene. They were not being polite. They weren't giving Pontius Pilate a chance. And they were outnumbered. That was a dicey situation. But Peter, poor, flawed, awkward Peter, the Bible tells us, Peter, standing with the 11, raised his voice and addressed them. "People of Judea, let this be known to you, and listen to what I say. Sometimes, if you're that one voice, you do have to demand that others listen to you. It takes two to have a conversation. But if we speak loudly from our convictions and from a place of divine love, if we do in fact demand to be heard, we are more than halfway there. This is a stressful time for our society. The inauguration is over and the work continues. So let us resolve to stand our ground, to speak our minds, while keeping our eyes and ears open to differences of opinion and perspective. Let us agree to let all that we do be done, in the words of Paul, in love.